Hey guys, and welcome to the start of Grakloros Facts. So today we're going to be starting with talking about the human lands, which are mainly around the coastlines, with one exception. Um, and we're going to start with Saxland, as you are familiar with, where our major campaign has taken place. So Saxland is a common-speaking country. Um, Typical distribution of wealth, very, poor places, rich places, your standard distribution. It's basically England. Currently holds lands separated on the southern peninsula. So this top land right here is actually Saxland, whereas the southern plain is made up of Cataland and another country that has yet to be named, but they have been taken over and are now part of Saxland. It is separated by the Oronian Sea, and it borders the Isle de Gaul to the north, the Silurian Forest, the Golden Isles, or sorry, the Golden Plains, the Northern Red Mountains, Azure Wood, Grecia, and the West Isles. Now, the around the border of the human lands and the elf lands are a lot of forts because the humans and the elves were once at war, mainly being the two primary antagonists being the High Elves of the Sprawling Forest and the Wood Elves of the Silurian Forest. So there's some pretty contentious land still on the borders, where humans want part of the forest and elves don't want them to. Now the capital of Saxland is Oreburg, located about here. Some of the other major cities are Ugia, which is right out here. Ugia is it's an old city, and it lasts from an ancient empire, and it has a giant theater, a giant arena, and the Ugia Arena is very popular. And Rutherford takes place over in here. Winstead is down here. Heresford over here, and Azershire over here. Those are the major cities. Now, the king of Saxland is Reginald Battlemore the Black. He has some sons and some other lords that he has over the other cities. The main person over Ugia is Earl Simon Blackmore, Prince of Saxland. Rutherford is Lord William Blackwolf. Winstead is Duke Matthew Battlemore, Prince of Saxland. Heresford is ruled by Lord Andrew Truesword, and Azershire is ruled by Lord Thomas Stormship. Now moving on to Grecia, down here. We're going to go south for a minute. Grecia is the former ruler of the ancient continental empire. It's basically like Greece, Macedonia, Rome. They speak Common, but they also speak Grecian. The capital is Caesarea. Currently, the current ruler is Queen Gioma Hanesha. It borders southern Saxland, the wild elves of Azure Wood, the dwarves of the Red Mountain, and has many of these island city-states within it, and it borders the Southern Ocean. Some of them, then we'll go talk about the West Isles. So West Isles has a strong connection to the Feywild. It's basically Scotland and England. They speak Common, but they also speak a form of Gaelic, and there's a group of halflings that live amongst them that talk very fast with a very strong accent, that are very red-headed and very not shy. Um, some of the capital is Denoiden, and the ruler is Queen Emily, also known as the Emerald Queen. Some of the major cities are Belud, Letitia, Beldid, Belle-Legion, and it's off the coast of Saxony, and it's these two major islands. There's another smaller one and some other little ones in the inlet. Um, the two islands are separated by Loch Morar. And we'll move on to the Isle de Gaul. So the Isle de Gaul is basically France. It borders Saxland to the south, the sprawling forest where the High Elves live to the east, and Usland to the north, and the West Ocean, specifically separated by Saxland by the Bay of Torrents and this river that runs through their borders. So, like I said, it's basically French. They speak Common and Gaul, and the capital is Ludus, and is ruled by King Aubergenois Leblanc. Luc Aubergenois Leblanc. Just north of that is Usland, which is basically Germany and Slavic nations. It's many small nations underneath the rulership of the Usland regime. It's a very skeptical nation. They see arcane magic as like dark magic, not to be practiced. They only believe in divine magic. So there's clerics, but you won't find a wizard's college in Usland. At least not that has any sort of reputation, nothing that isn't below ground. It borders the Isle de Gaul to the south, the windswept mountains to the east, and Northland to the north. It is ruled by King Arnold the Godsent, and the capital is Markelsburg. Now, to the north of that is Northland. Northland is made up of three specific lands separated by the North Sea. It's basically Scandinavia and Norse countries. The capital is Brumunddal, and is ruled by King Olfar Rolsson the Red. Major cities are Svertsund, Jarlshof, Harstad, and Bjorgvin. It borders Usland to the south, Ruskland to the east, the windswept mountains to the south, and the Great Glacier to the north. Beyond that is Rusland. Now, Rusland was the first human lands to fall to the orcs during the wars, and is currently under occupation and still ruled by the son of Khadik Khan, Gorvik Khan. It borders the Great Glacier to the north, Northland to the east or west, and the High Elf lands to the south, partially the orcs in the Great Marshes to the south. It is separated by the Great Lakes from the Shining Mountains and Mania, and there's a section of the Mithril Forest to the east, which is lands of the Grey Elves. The capital is Eborn. Major cities are St. Cuthbertsburg and Alden. Now, Ivorus is this next human country in the northeast. It's a distant land. Mysterious indigenous people who live there survive the coldest habitable place in the world. It borders North Nijon to the southeast, down here, the lands of the Grey Elves and the Gnomes to the south. Now, for the most part, there are nomadic people with elders as leaders and like family clans. They don't really have a centralized leader. They have the closest thing they have to a capital is a meeting place called Ivor, and it's basically a um, a place centered around standing stones. It's a temporary inhabitant. It's kind of where they meet at certain times of the year to discuss between all the tribes what's going on and treaties and where migrations are going and who's following who and things like this. The closest thing it has to a major city is another meeting place called Kodak. That's roughly up here in the northwest or northeast, and that's just another meeting place. Below that is the Eastern Empire, so it's basically the Asian. North Nijan is more like Japan. It is the ruler, that is the seat of the empire. It's basically Japanese. The capital is Tsuwano. It borders Ivers to the north and the rising mountains to the west, and it's separated by the Gulf of Caspia to the south. And then there's South Nijon. It's basically like Thailand or Southeast Asia. The capital is Caspia. It is separated by Turkland, by the Indus Sea, and the rising mountain, the New Dawn Mountains to the east. I changed their name. They were once the Rising Mountains, but I changed them to the New Dawn Mountains. And then there's West Nijon, which is basically China. The capital is Fuxao. It borders the Yakfolk Plateau to the north, the Elves of the Mistral Forest to the west, and the Rising Mountains the New Dawn Mountains to the east. Now the New Dawn Mountains are home to some dwarves, but it's mainly home to the tinkering gnomes. This is where most of the gnomes come from. Now the Shining Mountain is also home to dwarves and some gnomes, but mainly dwarves. The northern part has been taken over by a lot of Duergar, and the dwarves of the south are currently in war getting back their lands. The Windswept Mountains is also home to dwarves and some gnomes, and among all of these mountain ranges, and the red dwarves are from the Red Mountains. All of these mountain ranges have one thing in common, besides their inhabitants, is the fact that they're all home to dragons for a lot of reasons, but living precariously on the mountain peaks are groups of Goliaths. But we'll talk about that in another episode. We have 2 more countries to go over. Turkland is basically Middle East into India. The capital is Taktik Zata, ruled by Sultan Rudik Khan, another son of Kadik Khan, but his half-orc son, who is very much in league with the humans and very, very noble, very kind, very intelligent, and willing to make peace treaties, which is why he has remained in power. Major cities are Rajbali and Zolandaria. It borders the Mithril Forest to the north, along with Mania, the Shining Mountains to the west, and the Aquaramian Islands to the east. The Aquaramian Islands are home to the aquatic elves. Lastly is Sareta. Sareta is basically Egypt and North Africa. The capital is Nunjapa, and the Sultan is Arabar Mudvev. The Red Mountains to the west, the Shining Mountains to the east, the Searing Desert to the north, and the Red Gulf to the south. So Sareta speaks Saretan and Common. Turkland speaks Turkish and Common. Nijon speaks Nijanese and Common. Ivers speaks a group of languages. Rusland speaks Ruskish and Common. Northland speaks Norse and Common. And Usland speaks Usted and Common. And that's all for the human world. So join me again next time where we'll talk about elves. Alright, bye guys.